Okay, guys. So we've got a double header tonight with the lovely Joe. So if you can put yourselves on mute, except for me and Joe at the moment, and then I'll put myself on mute. Some of you know Joe. She's been with us she's been helping us at WMUK for 2 years now. She started with us in April
Wow.
of 2021. When I was pointed in her direction, and since then we've been doing a monthly mindfulness session, which is amazing, and I know a lot of you join us for that. But tonight we've got a double header when Joe is going to be talking to us, and I wrote down some mental health issues and strategies for patients and carers dealing with situations like the ones that most of us or all of us are in. And Joe is a counsellor and psychotherapist, runs her own business down in Bristol. And as I say, she knows our community. She knows the kind of people we are and some of the problems that we're challenged with mental health and coping strategies. So without further ado, Joe, I'd like to hand over to you. There will be some others joining us, I guess. And then at the end of this, she's going to do a presentation. There'll be some Q&As, and then we're going to go straight into a mindfulness session, hopefully at 8 o'clock. So, Joe, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you very much, Bob, for that lovely introduction. I can't believe it's 2 years already. That's amazing. And thank you, everyone, for giving up your evening or morning, depending on whereabouts you are in the world, and for tuning in, especially for this longer session. I've got two heads on, so hopefully they'll fit on the screen. And I need to start actually with an apology because my laptop decided to pack up this afternoon while I was preparing my presentation. So I've had to switch to my iPad. So that's why it's a slightly smaller screen, for which I apologize. And I've had to come up with a on the hoof way of providing you with slides. And I just hope it's going to work. I think it is. I'm going to share my screen, and I've prepared everything in a photo album, which is the only way I could get it to work on my iPad. So this is resilience in action. Instead of despairing, I thought, okay, I can find a way to do this. And I just hope it's going to work smoothly for you. Afterwards, I will be sending to Louisa and Bob a full set of the stuff I'm talking about. And so you'll get a lot more detail than I'm going to be talking through now, because I don't want to bamboozle you with too much info on a relatively small screen. But I will talk through what I've prepared, and we'll take it from there. So the idea that I had when Bob said that they wanted this sort of mental health webinar is I've sort of turned it, and I've called it Wellbeing, which I think is a very more positive way to look at things, although of course well-being equals good mental health, so it's the same thing. And I'm going to try, with your permission, to share my content on my screen and just hope that I can make it work. So if you'll bear with me for 1 sec while I just press share photos, and then I have to choose the album I've made, which is this, and I think I have to select all the photos in advance. So I'm just doing that quickly now for you. So if you're bearing with me, thank you very much. I haven't done too many because I wanted to keep it fairly simple. So I've selected 14 photos, and I'm going to add them, and I'm not actually sure what's going to happen right now, so I'm keeping everything crossed that any minute now you're going to see my hand.
Yes.
Wellbeing. Can you all see that? Yes, good. Thank you, Bob. So I've called it Wellbeing, and I had to be quite creative with my annotations. This is the only one of two that I've annotated by hand, to be honest. So I've started out with this slide introducing the theme of well-being, and I chose a picture I took, I think this time last year, or just slightly further down the line last year, when the cherry blossom was out, because I thought it was such a beautiful symbol of a plant in its absolute glory in the springtime. And so what I was going to talk around that is that I want to address mental health issues, well-being issues for both patients. I don't like even saying patients, but people living with some kind of disease or issues going on in their body, and also for their carers or their partners or loved ones, family members, whatever. So I'm and basically, whatever I'm talking about applies to all people. And if you're listening as someone living with WM, or if you're listening as someone caring for someone, or sharing your life with someone living with it, or whether you're an interested party listening because you're interested, I'm hoping that this will be relevant to everyone. So that's my first slide, which is just well-being. And I think, yes, yay, this is one I took a couple of summers ago on Hayling Island down near Portsmouth, which is where one of my sisters lives. And they had this incredible, I'm quite proud of that picture actually, they had this incredible sunflower farm where you could go and walk among them. They were literally head height, and you could pick as many sunflowers as you wanted, and then you paid for however many you got. Anyway, I thought that was a nice introduction to showing a plant thriving. And you're thinking, well, what's that got to do with well-being, apart from it being fun and uplifting to walk through sunflower field? And the reason is that I wanted to talk about the set of physical needs that every living thing has. So obviously a stone doesn't need anything, it just stays there and it is. And it might get eroded by the tides and by weather and by volcanoes and earthquakes, but it basically just doesn't really need anything. Whereas every living thing, whether it's a plant or an animal or a human, is born with a set of, in this case, well, let's look at the plant first, if that's okay. The plant is is born with a set of needs. It's born with the need to get the right amount of light and water and soil and not too drafty, or maybe it needs a lot of wind. You know, a plant is born with a set of needs, and it's also born inside it with a guidance system which will drive it to get those needs met. So in the case of the sunflower, obviously it needs sunlight and it needs rain and the right soil and the right living conditions, but it also is going to be driven to face the sun. And so if you've been to countries where they have these beautiful fields of sunflowers, you'll be aware that they will turn to the sun, they'll turn to face the sun as the day goes on and as the sun moves across the sky. And so that is an example of a flower, a plant, getting its needs met. And the interesting thing is, as we all know, when a plant gets its needs met more or less in balance, it will be a fantastically healthy specimen of that plant. And so what's really helpful to see is, looks like these sunflowers in this picture were really getting just what they needed, the right amount of sun, which, being on the south coast of England, I'm sure they were in a reasonable position to do that. They're not as golden as they might be in the south of France or Spain, but they're looking pretty good. So the sunflower has the needs, but it also has like a sat nav inside it. From the moment that seed germinates, telling it exactly what balance of chemicals to draw up through its roots from the soil and exactly how much sunlight to give itself. And it is a fantastically complex thing, and it knows how to get those needs met. Now, human beings are actually no different, in the sense that we have a set of physical needs we're born with. For example, and you'll be well aware of this, we need to have warmth and shelter. We need to have food and water and exercise and sleep and all of those other things that physically we need. And really, in this climate, certainly we need clothing as well to keep ourselves warm, but that probably comes under shelter and warmth. So we have all those physical needs. And if you think about a newborn baby is born with a guidance system that will drive it absolutely inevitably and inexorably to get those needs met. You know, the baby will cry if it's hungry, if it needs changing, if it wants a cuddle, if it needs feeding, it will cry until it gets its needs met. And as we grow and as our brain develops and our body develops, we have more sophisticated needs and more sophisticated ways of getting those needs met. But we too are born with a set of emotional and physical needs. So, and I've mentioned the physical, and I'm going to move on to the emotional needs now. So this slide, as you can see, is a little bit of a quiz for you, just to keep you on your toes here, for you to think for a moment. And I'm not expecting you to know all the answers, and I'm not even going to ask you to share the answers, but have a look at that. This basically the form of therapy I do, which is called human givens therapy, takes the view that we are all born with emotional needs as well as physical needs, and that we are born with a system, a guidance system, like an internal sat nav that helps us get those needs met. And that when they are met more or less in balance, we are emotionally and physically healthy, more or less. You know, obviously we can't account for things that come along that might genetically or environmentally cause disease or illness. But having said that, when we get our emotional needs more or less met in balance, we are more or less emotionally healthy. So I'm just going to give you a moment to look at those pictures, to scratch your head and think, oh, what do those things mean? And just have a think for yourself if you can guess what any of those emotional needs are. In a minute, I'm going to move it onto the slide that actually shows the answers. Okay, so not to keep you too long wondering and wondering what on earth that's all about, I'm going to show it now with the words on. So that first one, congratulations to anyone who guessed something like this, is the need for security or safety. And you could say that that is our primary emotional need, because if we don't feel security, none of the other needs are going to happen. You know, I'm not going to be fulfilled in my work if the roof's falling in on me. I'm not even going to be thinking about being fulfilled in my work at that point. I'm just going to think, how do I stay safe in this moment? So feeling safe, feeling secure is our most primary emotional need. And that could be feeling safe physically, but it can also, of course, include feeling safe emotionally. And that's very, very important for us. And when we need to learn, if you think about a child at school, if they're living in an unsafe environment at home, for example, or if they feel unsafe at school for some reason, they're not going to be in a position to learn. It makes sense. They can't thrive and learn if they're worried about their safety. And that is the same for us through our life, really. So that's safety. The next one I'd like to jump to actually is control. So jumping across the top to the one that says control. It doesn't matter whether we're 3 years old or 103 years old or somewhere in the middle, which most of us are. We need a sense of control over our life. We need to be able to take decisions about our treatment or about our life, where we live, what we do. We all need that to a greater or lesser extent. And so that's a really important one. The next most important one, interestingly, you can scan through and decide, have a guess at what I'm going to say next. It might come as quite a surprise, is actually, I think I'm going from memory here. I think it's status. So the next one down from control, status is the next most important one, or status, as some people say. To feel valued and to feel respected by the people around us is massively important. And we all know that feeling of not feeling valued or feeling dissed, or if somebody's rude about us or disrespects us, or we don't get that promotion at work that we were really working towards, that we knew we deserved. That's a horrible feeling. And so that sense of feeling valued, and again, this is valid for children, for teenagers, for adults, for older adults. It's valid all the way through our life. We need to feel respected. It's really important. When we don't feel respected, we feel stress, basically. And the next one up, again, might be a surprise, is privacy. So down on that bottom layer, in the middle, privacy, being able to have time and space to be in our own company and to be by ourselves is actually really vital. And you will be aware what kind of person you are. Some people need quite a lot of time on their own in order to recharge their batteries, in order to just chill out and relax. Some people really need a lot. Other people might need less, and they get energy from being around other people. And it's about being aware, and you will be aware of what your own style is and what you need. Sometimes it's correlated with how introverted or extroverted you are. Some people say if you're more introverted, you need more time on your own. And if you're more extrovert, you need less time on your own. But even the wildest, loudest extrovert still needs downtime. Otherwise, we get stressed. So that's useful as well to think about how much time by yourself you need. Now, the reverse of that is if we have too much time on our own without enough company, we can become isolated, and that's not good either. So that leads me on to the middle of the top row, attention. We need to be able to give and receive positive attention from other people. You know, we are social creatures, we are pack animals, really. And so we really need to have time with others. And that takes me down to the middle row, left-hand side, community. Really important to be part of a community. And that could be a faith community. It could be a community like the WM community, which is so welcoming that you're all part of. It could be going to the golf club. It could be being at school, being in a family, having a special interest group, liking a certain type of music. All of those things are really important things for us to feel part of something bigger than ourselves. And that's a lovely thing. And when we feel part of that, like singing in a choir, for example, it can be a wonderful feeling of fulfillment in a way. So going on to the next one, I'm just looking at the ones I haven't done now. We're going up the ladder now, the sort of hierarchy. A sense of achievement, really important. You know, the sense that there's something in our life that we can do and that we can do well is really important. And that could be anything. It could be gaining a swimming badge when you're a child or an adult. It could be finishing a book, reading a book. It could be, you know, finding a way to learn new stuff, really important. And I think the only two I haven't done, there's intimacy in the middle there. Now that might be physical intimacy with someone, if we're lucky, or it might be emotional intimacy with someone. And that could include, as in the illustration, connection with a pet. You know, that can be hugely rewarding for some people. And it can save somebody from loneliness if they live alone and they're lucky enough to have connection with an animal. And finally, the very top of the pyramid, bottom right-hand side, purpose, a sense of meaning and purpose in our life. And that comes when the other needs are met more or less in balance. So that is a whistle-stop tour through our emotional needs. Now, in real life, which we all live in, it is not always possible to get all those needs met 100% all of the time. In fact, it is impossible to get them all met all of the time. So what we're looking at is balance. We're looking at getting most of them met most of the time. And if by looking through this, you look at it and you think, gosh, I'm really lacking in one or more of those areas, then it may be helpful to ask yourself, okay, what can I do to change that? What can I do to get myself more involved with friends and family, or to boost my sense of achievement, or give myself a bit more control in my life, or whichever one or more than one it is. It can be useful. And what I will include, I'm going to write myself a note. When I send the notes, I'm going to send a link to an emotional needs audit, which means that you can fill it in for yourself, perhaps every week or every month, and just check in with yourself and see how you're doing and say, okay, I've scored myself fairly low on privacy. What do I need to do to boost that? And you will come up with ideas that will help you. And when you do that, you are taking care of your well-being, you're boosting your resilience and your mental health. So it's a good way. And again, it's giving you a sense of control over that. Because sometimes stuff happens in life, as we're all aware, where our sense of control, even security, is sometimes taken away. So then it's about, okay, what bit can I control? Maybe I can talk to my doctor and get more say in my treatment program, for example. Or maybe if I don't feel very safe, what can I do to boost that? What support do I need? What help can I get? Who can I talk to? Etc. So there are lots of things we can do ourselves. And sometimes if we feel like we've run out of ideas ourselves, we can talk to someone else about those things, whether it be a friend, a family member, a doctor, or a mental health professional, or any other, or a charity like WM. There are lots of places to turn to help us get those needs met. Now, sometimes we don't get those needs met because there are barriers in our life at different stages in our life, in different situations, to getting those needs met. And that might be, for example, if someone's in a toxic environment, for example, a child at school is being bullied, or somebody is in a not very healthy relationship, it prevents us getting those needs met, as you can imagine. So then we need to either get out of that toxic environment if possible, or if not possible for whatever reason, then we need help to boost our coping skills. And that brings me on to the second reason why we might not be able to get our needs met sometimes, which might be missing coping skills. Like we haven't learned how to manage anger outbursts, or we haven't learned ways to deal with anxiety, to stay calm, or we need to think about or talk about new ways to connect with other people so we don't feel isolated. So at different times in our life, we all have times where one or more needs are not being met to a suitable level. And then the final thing that might stop us getting our needs met is damage to that inner sat nav, that innate guidance system. And that might be through illness, for example, dementia or a stroke. That can obviously affect our brain's capacity to get those needs met. Or it may be that we have trauma, whether physical or emotional, and it's holding us back from getting those needs met. And in those specific instances, I would say sometimes seeking external help is a really good idea. But the good news is that whatever stage of life and what's going on for us, it is possible to learn new coping skills. And today I thought I would focus particularly on sort of understanding how our brain and body work very briefly, and perhaps dealing with managing anxiety and staying calm, because I think those are simple, practical skills that can be useful for everyone. I just want to check in with Bob, because I'm realizing that because we spent a little while talking at the beginning, it's now 7:25, and ideally I was supposed to be talking till only past, but I need to talk for more if everyone's happy, and then leave slightly less time for the Q&A. Would that be okay, Bob?
That's absolutely fine, because if we run out of time, I can take questions by email and address them to you.
Exactly, and then we could address them another time. Thank you. I think it's if everyone's happy, I'd like to get through the material I've prepared, if that's okay. But please do think about your questions, and I'll try and answer as many as I can. I'll try and finish by 2:45. Is that okay? And leave 15 minutes for questions?
Fine, yeah.
How does that sound, Bob?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay, if I can finish earlier, I will. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so this is another way of just showing those needs, but in the form of a ladder, showing the security and control, status, privacy, teamwork, which is connection with others, learning, which is that sense of achievement, and then purpose. That's just another way of expressing the same information in a different style. Okay, now I want to come onto the brain, and people who've been to my mindfulness sessions before might have seen this before, but this is my very simplified, and in fact I've got a copy of it here, but I can't see myself, so I'm going to stick with the one on the screen at the moment. So the human brain, this is my very simplified, obviously hugely simplified version of the brain, and it roughly evolved in 3 chunks. So if you look at that lowest chunk, the red chunk that I've done color coded just like traffic lights just for ease, that lowest red chunk represents the most basic part of our brain. So we're going to be working with the brain and working with the body to help ourselves stay calm, to help ourselves manage anxiety, and to help ourselves boost our well-being and our resilience. And so when we're calm, the brain looks a little bit in the fuzzy felt world, which I've made, like this. So the lowest part is the brainstem and the cerebellum, and those parts correspond to the most basic processes of the human brain. So like sleeping and waking, breathing, reflexes, digestion, growth and repair, your hair, your nails, blinking, all of that stuff that happens whether we want it to, whether we think about it or not, hormone production, all of that stuff happens at this very basic part of the brain. And it's sometimes called the reptilian brain, because that part of the brain is how lizards are made. They just have that bit. And they're pretty brilliant at being lizards, and they're very successful, and they've been around way longer than us. So it does all of the basic stuff that is at an unconscious automatic level. Then going up the brain, we've got next the mammalian brain, the mammal brain, which we share with our mammal cousins. And that part, that's the little orange circle with the little red thing in the middle. Again, hugely simplified just for this explanation. And that part of the brain is sometimes referred to as the limbic system or the mammalian brain, because we share it with mammals. And that part of the brain is where the feelings are largely lodged. So if you think about a horse or a monkey or a dog or a cat, you can see that they have feelings, that they might be scared, relaxed, stressed out, happy, angry, agitated, all of these different emotional states that they have access to. We also have access to those. Obviously, ours are a lot more sophisticated. And that little blip in the middle, that little red dot that I've put, which is called the amygdala, which is the Greek word for almonds, we actually have 2 of those little dots inside. That is like our internal smoke alarm, monitoring and scanning the environment all the time, awake and asleep, for threats, for any threats to the existence of us. Okay, so if a lion, and I know I've used this before, but it's the simplest. If a lion smashes into this room right now, my brain is going to register it, obviously, by seeing, hearing, smelling, sensing it, whatever. And immediately what my brain is going to do is that. So the human thinking brain, which is the green bit on the top, is going to be switched off in that moment, so that the amygdala, which is that little red blip in the middle there, can go through its emergency memory bank of memories and check, okay, what do we do when a lion comes in the room? And it does this automatically without language, very, very quickly, in a millisecond, less than a thousandth of a second. It runs through its memory bank of threat situations and it pulls out the one that's closest to a lion in the room, because the brain works in patterns. It works in patterns so that we can be flexible in the world and so that we can respond to things in a way which is, oh yeah, that's a bit like that, so this is what I need to do here. And that's how we navigate through the world, through patterns. And so it's going to look for the nearest pattern to lion in the room, which is chased by horses when I was a kid. And it's going to then say, okay, we can stay frozen, which we are right now while it's searching for a response for a microsecond. And then it's going to choose either fight the lion or flee, run away, fight or flight. And in that moment, my thinking brain is switched off, because if this green bit, which is so developed in all of us and so incredibly has so many capacities to imagine things and think things through and do logical steps and all the rest of it, if that stays switched on, I've had it, because I waste time thinking about the lion and I don't do what I need to do to survive in that moment of threat. So far, so good. I hope that makes sense. In a moment of threat, we revert to the automatic, all of that is unconscious and automatic brain, so that we can maximize our chances of survival in an instantaneous threat situation. Now, what happens in our body at that point is also a cascade of responses. And again, people who've listened to me before may have heard this. Apologies for the repetition, but sometimes it's worth repeating. So our breathing becomes shallower. And we've all had that horrible feeling where we breathe in like that, and immediately we might get our stomach flipping, or we might get our heart rate increasing, our blood pressure rises, the oxygen is diverted from our central core of our body into our limbs, ready for action, ready for fighting, ready for fleeing, ready for running away. And we might get shaky, and we might get a whole sensation of adrenaline, cortisol. Those are the stress hormones that get us into action to get away from or fight that threat, which our ancestors, of course, had to do repeatedly. Fortunately, in this world country at the moment, we don't have to live in that. So we don't very often need that. But the interesting thing about this little amygdala in the middle is that it cannot tell the difference between a real threat, that animal or tribe rushing at us and attacking us, or an imagined threat. Oh my goodness, what if? What if I can't answer the questions in my exam? Classic one. What if I turn up late for my job interview? What if, I get negative results or news in my next doctor's appointment? What if the people around me are judging me poorly and don't like me? We can come up with any number of negative imaginings, and what those negative imaginings can do is set off the same stress and threat response as a real wild animal about to eat us, because that part of our brain cannot tell the difference whether we're in a real threat or an imagined threat. And it also has no sense of time. So if something difficult happened to us when we were 5 years old, it may be that we are instantaneously transported back. We've all had that sensation, to being that 5-year-old, given a certain set of triggers or stimulus in the environment. So the brain is looking out for those threats, and it's going to do its best to keep us safe from them. Now, sometimes that's appropriate. If a lion jumps in my room, I want that fight or flight response, because that's my best chance of getting out of it and surviving. But If I'm thinking and thinking about this work I've got to do and I don't know how I'm going to do it, and now my laptop's broken, what if it's terrible? That's not going to help me to do it. So I need to get my thinking brain back on as quickly as possible if I realize that the imagined threat is actually not an immediate threat to my survival. And therefore, what I need to do, and this is the next stage I want to talk to you about, is become familiar with my own physical response. So our body and our mind work together. And in our modern society, we tend to live in our head a lot. So we think about, we're thinking, and we just bring the body along. Or if the body's not working as well as we want, then we might be annoyed and frustrated or disappointed. And then we will think about it. But we tend to just take it for granted while it's ticking over reasonably well. And so what I'd like to invite you to do is to think about your physical response in that perceived lion in the room situation. So when you feel a threat, whether it's imagined or real, what is your own physical response? Because we're all slightly different in this. And there is a whole range of physical responses. I mentioned a few, like the heart rate increasing, the breathing getting shallow, maybe the limbs get shaky. For me, my stomach flips. That's my first thing that tells me, oh, right, emergency, what are we going to do? And everyone is slightly different, but we all have access to that range. So what I've got here is a little annotated one, which I'm not going to read through it all, but you can just quickly see and think, oh yeah, I've noticed that. And there will be others. People have told me other ones as well, so I can't remember right now, but maybe their lips start to wobble, or maybe their voice gets shaky, or, you know, all sorts, or a pain in the chest, you know, tightness in the chest. We haven't got all of them there, but there's a lot of them. And the useful thing about thinking about that is to become aware of your own early sense of that response. So when you get that first inkling that things might be going awry, that is your opportunity to take action to keep yourself calm. And again, that's why sometimes it's useful to be aware of whether this is a real threat or an imagined threat, so that we can act accordingly. Because if it's an imagined threat, if it's a negative what if, then we have a chance to take back control and calm ourselves and actually have access to that green thinking brain, which is the one that can actually come up with a helpful plan. Okay, and also manage those anxious thoughts and feelings. So moving on, okay, so what do we do to actually stay calm? It's all very well talking about it, but what can we physically do? Well, the best thing is to use our breathing and our body to relax. So what I'd like to do is just help you, and some of you will have done this with me before, but I'd like to focus for the next couple of minutes actually on the breathing, so that you can practice doing a kind of breathing which will help you to stay calm. And in those situations where you actually need that thinking brain, that thinking cap, because you want to keep your head straight and you want to be able to think up a plan and you want to use your brain to come up with solutions, or, you know, just keep yourself more comfortable, or stay calm before an appointment or anything else where you need to have that thinking brain and not panic, then using your breathing and your body can be incredibly helpful. And what I'll do in the second part of this, when we do the mindfulness, is I'll do a little bit more detail about the breathing. But right now, just to give you a chance to consciously focus on your breathing and get yourself out of that uncomfortable fight or flight state, which we're not designed to be in for long periods, is to just, if you want to, and if you're comfortable with this, you can place a hand on your abdomen below the belly button. And you can also place another hand on your chest, and you can place, no, there aren't any more, there's just the two hands there. So one on your abdomen, one on your chest, if that's comfy. And just focus for a moment on your position where you're sitting, and just be aware of your breathing. Even just focus in, tune into that breath. And see if when you breathe in on the next in-breath, you can breathe all the way down to that lower hand. Perhaps noticing the belly swell a bit or the hand rise a bit on that in-breath. And when you're ready to breathe out through the nose if you can, because that slows it all down, just see if you can almost use those tummy muscles to gently press that air out, and notice that the tummy flattening a bit or the hand falling away a bit. And it's okay if, as the next breath naturally comes, if you feel the upper hand, the chest, rise and fall as well, that's fine. But the aim is always to breathe down to that lower hand, because that's where the diaphragm, the breathing mechanism, is situated. And when we breathe down there, right into our abdomen, if you like to think of it like that, slowly and deeply, just gently lengthening that out breath, we actually turn off that fight or flight response, because we're giving our body, and by extension our mind, the message that actually everything's okay right now. This is not an immediate emergency. The ceiling is not falling in. There's no lion in the window. So we can just take a few moments to be kind to ourselves, to thank that part of our brain that looks after our safety for looking out for us, but to reassure it with every breath that actually it's okay, that we can breathe in perhaps a sense of calm, and that any sense of stress, whether it's in the heart or the chest, the stomach or the throat, the hands or the mouth or the eyes, or the head or the legs, all of those sensations that were building up to that discomfort and that sense of fear, they can just leave the body on the out breath. So that with every out breath, as you lengthen the out breath, you can just begin to let go and relax a bit more. And the beauty of practicing this when we're feeling panicky, but also when we're feeling calm on a regular basis, means that we can reinforce that calming down, that natural calming down technique, to the extent that we are able to stay calm in situations where we want to, and also to allow ourselves to get that balance back into our life, so that we can develop ourselves, so that we can cope with those challenges that we all face from time to time, and so that we can grow in ways that we may or may not have guessed or imagined. So that if we're living with a health condition or supporting someone with a health condition, by finding time, by making time even reminding ourselves every day to take time out, to relax the body, and to allow the mind to be more settled and more clear, we actually lower our baseline level of stress so that we're freer to cope with stuff. And we're also able to live as well as we possibly can in whatever circumstances we find ourselves. It's a way of boosting our coping strategies. So one of the things that is really helpful in these situations is just, I'm just going to go back to that for a moment. It's just practicing that breathing. And if you find things like mindfulness helpful, there are the sessions that we run every month with WM, and they get recorded. So you've always got a resource then if you find it easier to have something to listen to, not while driving, but when it's safe to just sit quietly. But also you can look out for finding ways that work for you to get calm. For some people, it might be reading, listening to music, chilling out and just watching something not too challenging on TV. Or it might be spending time with a friend, or getting out into nature, or being with an animal, a loved pet. There are lots and lots of ways to boost your coping skills and your resilience. But it all starts with the body and breathing, and thinking about getting those emotional needs met in balance as well as you can. But what I want to add is that perfection is never possible. So we're not looking to get everything 100%, as I've said. We all live in the real world. We all deal with challenges foreseen and unforeseen. And what we're looking for is just finding some kind of balance. And in fact, if you think about how the body works, the body is constantly balancing all the time. Even when we're here now, there are trillions probably of chemical balances going on within the body. And when we relax more, we actually free up capacity in the body to work towards that balance. And we get the benefit of feeling better, feeling more calm, perhaps being able to think more clearly, and perhaps just feeling more balanced in ourselves. And all of those things lead to sort of having a sense of resilience and having coping strategies for ourselves. And the final thing I wanted to say about that is, if there are worries, and of course we all have worries from time to time, particularly if we're dealing with health conditions, is a good thing to do, and I have mentioned this in some other sessions, is to schedule worry time. So it's okay to have worries. We all have worries, and sometimes worries help us to make a plan. It's only when they go round and round like a washing machine in the middle of the night that they're not helpful. But if we schedule a worry time during the day, perhaps in the morning or the afternoon when it's nice and light, and when we've got our full capacity to think and plan and problem solve and to stay calm, and we use a technique like How to Worry Well, which I will also share after with Louisa and Bob, you can set aside 15 minutes for worry time, and that's perfectly fantastic to do that. And if worries try and come up any other time, you can just calmly make a note of them. And then when you get to your worry time, you can go through 5 steps, and they will be on the sheet I'm going to send of How to Worry Well. And the first one is simply saying, I am worried about. So it could be something like, I'm worried about my next appointment at the hospital. Okay, we're just going to state it like that. And then we're not going to shy away from what's the worst that can happen. So we can calmly state, okay, what's the worst that could happen? And we can come up with the worst. Obviously, most people are good at imagining that. So we can come up with, okay, that's the worst case scenario. Thank you, brain, for that. But now let's give ourselves the opportunity to flip that and say, okay, but what's the best that could happen? What's the best case scenario? And we don't know which of those scenarios it's going to be, but the more we practice what's the best that can happen, the more we give ourselves the opportunity to stay calm and to allow other possibilities as well. So we've done what I'm worried about, worst, best. Okay, and the next one gives us that sense of control, things I can do right now. Now, we might feel that we're not particularly in control of a given situation, and there may be factors beyond our control, but there are always some things we can control. And again, that comes back down to, okay, I might not be able to control what the results are, but I can control my response. I can use my breathing every day and carve out some relaxation time for myself, perhaps by doing mindfulness or just going for a lovely walk if that's appropriate, or looking out of the window at a beautiful view, or even looking through pictures and looking at beautiful views, or thinking about beautiful places. And those things will lower my blood pressure, will settle me, will calm me down, and will increase my capacity to think clearly, my access to that green thinking human brain. And with that green thinking human brain, we can come up with plans and solutions, or things that we can do, or people we need to talk to, or whatever. So keeping that thinking brain on, things I can do right now. It might be as simple as, okay, I can phone my sister or my friend or whatever. Or, okay, I'm going to do some calming breathing. Or I'm going to do something I know always makes me feel better. You know, whatever that may be. And then the final one is zooming out from that problem, seeing it in context and perspective, other factors to remember. So we can always then choose to zoom out from that issue and say, from that worry, other factors to remember. And there are always at least 1 or 2 or 3 other factors that you can add in there, where we zoom out and we see the bigger picture. At least I've got a supportive partner. At least my pet is here and they absolutely adore me, or whatever. You know, there's always going to be some at least. And so that's part of that. And what I wanted to finish with was a quote that I love, and I may have used this before, from Louisa May Alcott, the author of Little Women. She says, "I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning to sail my ship." And so all of this that we've been talking about today and the mindfulness that we'll be doing shortly is about exactly that. Learning, each of us learning to sail our ship. And that is a labor of lifelong learning. You know, that's something that we're all working on the whole time, sailing that ship. And on that note, I've got my summary here. So my top 10 ways, pay attention to physical needs. And I've got more details on this on the sheet I'll be sending you. Work towards getting needs met in balance, tune into the body, breathe and relax, make time to relax, aim for balance, not perfection, learn to worry well, and then keep on practicing and be kind to yourself. And be kind to yourself if you forget or if sometimes you do worry. It's okay. We're all human. We're all working on it. And finally, if it's helpful for you, there's online mindfulness and lots of other stuff out there as well. So that was I feel like that was very whistle stop. So thank you for your attention and for bearing with my reduced capacity on the technological front. And I'm now open for questions. So I will stop the share right now. Hope that's going to work. Stop the share. Yay.
Thank you, Joe.
And
thank you.
Thank you.
So most of you will know that at the bottom of your screen, there is a reactions button. And if you press on that, the first thing up is raise hand. So if you've got a question that you'd like to speak, ask Joe, just raise your hand and it will come up on my screen and I can give you the opportunity to speak. Or if you can't find that button, just wave at me and I'll try and get you on. I thought Simone was waving at me there, but she was adjusting her hair.
I've stunned everyone into baffled silence.
You have. Anybody got any questions? Any thoughts that I'd like to share with Joe? I know a lot of you or a lot of us do suffer that anxiety when we're coming up to our 3 monthly blood tests. They can be quite challenging for some of us. And I guess going through those steps you've just explained, Joe, is it like the day before or the couple of days before? I mean, for me personally, I always think, well, there's nothing I can do about my blood test. My blood is in me. They're going to take some out. So why get anxious about that? But I can understand why then the two following days or 3 following days, we're going to get the doctor talking to us about them. And that can be a very anxious time. And for me, like you've said, there's breathing or going out for do some exercise or something. That's my coping strategy. Okay, has anybody else got any other coping strategies that perhaps Joe hasn't spoken about? How they might. Nicola, yeah.
I thought I put my hand up, but it doesn't seem to have worked.
Oh, okay. You go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, you're saying like learn to recognize how your body reacts and everything. But once you know it's doing that, I didn't quite. So what's the solution? Like you just talk to yourself inside your head? Is that what you're meant to be doing?
Okay. Okay, that's a really, really helpful question. Thank you, Nicola. And obviously I had to deliver quite a lot of information in quite a short time. So I really appreciate that question. I think the reason I sort of spent a little while showing the sort of cartoon of the body and encouraging you to think, okay, what is my initial reaction? Is that if you can become familiar with your initial reaction, then it gives you chance to sort of bring yourself back down into a more comfortable place before you go into perhaps all-out, blowout panic mode. And so it's much more easy to reduce your physiological and emotional response if you can catch it early and maybe even think in advance. And maybe what Bob was saying about, you know, the couple of days where you're waiting, maybe it's useful, and a lot of you have done this anyway, but to think, okay, what can I do in those 2 days while I'm waiting? Because I can't change the result, but I can help myself over those 2 days. How can I be kind to myself? And it's partly about being kind to yourself in these situations and think, okay, what would help me in those 2 days to distract myself? Is it, you know, plan a trip? Is it go to the cinema? Is it meet up with a friend? Is it go for a walk or have a picnic, depending on the weather? Well, you know, what is it that works for you or that would be really fun for you that maybe you haven't thought about doing that's going to help you through those days? And so what that comes back to, Nicola, is keeping yourself as comfortable as possible through those challenging times, I think. And that's why practicing the breathing when you are calm helps you then to have it at your fingertips or at your nose tips when you need it, when perhaps you're less calm or when you're likely to be less calm. And you know, being uncalm is something that happens to all of us. It's a human response. But you know, there are ways that we can manage that and ways that we can help ourselves keep more steady, feel more comfortable, deal with things perhaps a bit more smoothly. Does that sort of answer it, Nicola?
Yes, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for raising it, because I'm sure that's something I perhaps didn't go into in enough detail.
So in the absence of hands and looking at the screen, I think apart from Martin, we all live with WM. So there's only one carer, and that is Martin. I think I've got that right, Martin, haven't I? You're the carer? I think so, yeah. Or is it the other way around? I can't remember. One of you is, anyway. So hopefully we've all got partners, carers, somebody who looks out for us. And hopefully that you will get those guys to watch this recording when it's put on the website. But Joe, anything you can tell us what to share with our partners, carers,
Yes.
friends, family?
Yes, and what I'd like to say first, Bob, thank you for that point, is that if you happen not to be in a partnership, you know, if you happen to live alone, you don't have a partner, you know, that all is not lost, because you have other ways to connect. And the point is to connect with somebody. So if you're living alone, you know, and you can reach out to a family member or a friend, then fantastic. If you don't have anyone you feel able to reach out to, then you've got Bob and you've got WM and you've got this wonderful community. All of you here get what you're going through. All of you understand the difficulties, and maybe it's okay to reach out to Bob or Louisa or whoever it is and say, look, I want to chat to someone while I'm waiting for my results. Can you put me in touch with someone? Or your local support group. I know there are local support groups in many locations. So that's one thing, is even if you don't happen to have a partner living with you or whatever, doesn't mean you have to go through it alone. That's the first thing. But if you are lucky enough to have someone that's supporting you on a perhaps daily basis, what can you say to them? Well, you could share with them the stuff that we've gone through today, the stuff that we've discussed. You could explain, maybe become a tutor to them and explain what happens in our brain and our body when we feel agitated compared to calm. And that will help you to process it and understand it as well, because now you're all mini experts in it as well. And it's, you know, it's really powerful, useful, and well, I hope it's useful, but I found it really useful when I first learned it. And I've taught it to probably thousands and thousands of people now. And most people sort of, they say, oh yeah, that makes absolute sense. That makes sense. So I'm not just at the mercy, like seaweed in the sea being blown about. I'm not just at the mercy of my feelings and of my worries and my emotions. To an extent, I can't stop the whole tide, but actually I can gain a sense of control about how I choose to respond. And I can look after myself and think about those emotional needs. That's another really useful thing, is to look at that emotional needs, whether you like the picture poster one, or whether you prefer the ladder that shows the hierarchy, or both. Have a look at those. And I'm going to send, as I said, that needs audit where you can check in with yourself and you can actually say, okay, gosh, my need for time on my own, privacy this week has been really, really low. And it's making me feel a bit stressed out. What do I need to do to gain more time to myself, to reflect and relax? Or opposite, conversely to that, gosh, I'm feeling quite isolated this week, this month. What can I do to boost my connection, to get in touch? Who can I get in touch with? And if you can't think of anyone else, you've got WM. And that's the beauty of this organization, is that you're actually not going through this alone, even if you live alone, because you've connected already and you're here. So well done for that. Does that kind of answer it in terms of like what you?
Thanks for that, Joe. Yeah, and you've just reminded me actually that although I can't see too many on this screen, we do have quite a few people who live alone and perhaps haven't got access to, you know, a carer or whatever, and that's where our support groups have become so important. An example: only 2 weeks ago, a 68-year-old lady in Basildon, I think in Essex, we found out about her. She lives
Mhm.
alone. She's agoraphobic, and
Oh,
we've put her in touch with Linda, our group leader over in Norwich, and they're starting to build a relationship already. So that's really important. That communication there. So thank you for that.
that's a
And
lovely
yeah,
example. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah. So I've noticed that the time is now 19:58. So shall we crack on with our mindfulness session? If nobody else has got any questions.
Yeah, there's time for one more question if anyone has one. I don't want people to
Yeah.
feel rushed, or if there's something that that they
If
wanted
you've got
more
something if you,
with.
oh, somebody's, yeah. So anybody want to say anything before we move on? No. Okay. So I think, can we crack on, Joe, with the mindfulness session?